What is going to happen with TikTok? That's what we're talking about on today's Tread Talk, and we're going to go through the whole saga here and kind of where we're at. So to start, a couple of years back, or I guess in April, the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act was passed. Very specific, which highlighted things like TikTok that are applications or tools that are highly influential on American culture, and basically said that if any of those tools or applications are owned by what's considered a foreign adversary of the United States, which China is considered, that that company would have to either divest its U.S. Business assets or not be allowed inside of the states. So initially there was pushback from TikTok suggesting that this was a violation of First Amendment rights, and it ultimately was ruled that it wasn't a violation of First Amendment rights because foreign adversaries don't have First Amendment rights in the states. And this makes sense because what they were pushing for was just simply that they didn't have control over that algorithm in the app. Now, we'll talk more about it, but there are kind of two schools of thought at play. But in any case, the Supreme Court held up that the act did not violate any First Amendment rights, and that TikTok had to begin to comply with the expectations. Now, obviously, we saw a ton of bluster and noise that the old Donald Trump was not getting rid of TikTok and wanted to continue to negotiate, which appears that they did. And most recently, in late September, it was announced that these are the terms that have been agreed to related to TikTok in the United States. So if everything goes as expected, it will be board controlled, and TikTok's U.S. operations will have a 7-member board with 6 seats held by held by Americans, and only 1 seat held by TikTok original ownership. This also focuses on restructuring the ownership of the operation. So there's the board influencing decisions, and then there's the actual ownership, so people that are benefiting from the U.S. operation. And after all of this hypothetically goes through, only 20% of the U.S. entity of TikTok will be owned by the original TikTok owners. Still them having some, which is kind of interesting. But this should be, according to the goal, enough to limit influence of the content and the algorithm and all of that. So pretty interesting that they still hold some ownership. I think if you were to say, hey, I'm a little sketchy on what type of data you're getting, you might still be unsure if they're receiving any data at all with 20% ownership. I guess that's something that gets hammered out with the board and the rest of the stuff, but it's curious either way. Another element of the deal here is that the algorithm and content moderation would be owned by the United States, Americans on the board and ownership in the States. And the focus on this is that the algorithm would be retrained specifically for what the United States wants the citizens to kind of be either consuming or the way that they're to engage with it, and ultimately having control over what content needs to be pulled down and isn't allowed on the app, that type of thing. There's two schools of thought here, like I kind of talked about on the onset of this video. The first is, well, do we want China to be able to influence our children? Probably not. But then the second piece is like, what a lot of people really like about TikTok is that it's largely not moderated, and a lot of stuff that I think is a little bit more peer-to-peer as opposed to government to citizen. I think some of those types of things might be less visible in the future, which kind of diminishes some of the value. But I don't know, I don't know what China is doing with it. I don't know how they're using it, and I don't know what the U.S. intentions are. I think that it's wise for it to be owned by a U.S. investment group, because then there's multiple stakes for how things go, and I think that's a positive thing. I think you really do need that. But if it's not easily accessible to be owned by regular everyday people, then it just becomes another tool and talking piece for wealthy people and those that are politically active and that type of thing. So I mean, if you're looking at it in terms of, well, where's the negative, we have to work really hard as a society to then do a good job, be good stewards of the tool if we're gonna get in there. And the other thing to consider, and this is an argument made by TikTok and some of their pushing back, is that the algorithm was designed the way it was designed, and that's what it makes it unique and special. So changing it might not be a good idea. Decent argument as well. We'll have to see. We've got a 120-day window to get this finalized. We talked about some of the potential issues around them still having some ownership and some influence, the changing of the algorithm, potential political or wealth interference. It's lots of things to consider. What do you think is the most important thing here, and is this how you considered or how you thought a deal would be done, or did you think a deal like this would be done?